Hello guys, it's WesTZK and today we're going to be doing the Killing Floor 2 perk skills tier list, and we have a lot of perk skills to get through, so I'm going to be vaguely covering each one, but I'll also explain what they do. I won't take too long to go through each one because there is a lot we need to go through, so I'm just going to be vaguely covering everything just so the video is not like an hour long, you get bored, etc. So starting off with the Dreadnought skill, Berserker is level 5. I would give this about above average. You get 100% more health, which is good because Berserker can take more hits that way. However, you don't regen health, which is the only issue. So once you lose that health, you have to use your syringe or have a medic on your team heal you to get it back. And next up is Skirmisher. I would say this is a good perk skill. It's not the best because you do heal very slowly. You regenerate 1 point of health every second, but you also move and sprint 25% faster, so it is better. Coming up next is Vampire. I would give this about a good tier. You do heal 3 points of health for every Z you kill, and you also attack 20% faster with Berserker weapons, which is good. Although you can still easily die because if you get caught in a corner, Zeds can easily beat you up, so I suppose Vampire's not that good in that situation. And next up we have Butcher, which is going to be a level 10 skill. I'll put this in very good tier. Again, just like Vampire, you can attack 20% faster, and you actually do 20% more damage, whereas with Vampire you get 3 extra points of health. And next up is Resistance. I mean, I don't find myself using this skill very much. I much prefer Parry. With Resistance you gain 15% resistance to all damage, and you gain an additional 15% resistance to poison and sonic attacks, which I mean the Berserker does anyway, so it's like, yeah, whatever. And next up is Parry, and this one is an exceptional perk skill. Like, this is needed if you want to survive as Berserker. Basically, parrying any attack with a melee weapon will actually reduce the incoming damage by 30%, and it also gives you a buff in terms of damage and melee attack as well. It lasts for 8 seconds, you can basically do more damage, which is really good because if you pair it with Spartan as well, you can just get out of any bad situation. And coming up next, level 20, you got Smash. I mean, I would give it about above average. It depends what weapon it is. If it's the Pulverizer, then this will be pretty good because you can just do the heavy explosive attack. It will just kill anything. Whereas with Massacre, it really depends again what type of weapon you're using. If it's the katana and you want to do like light attacks, then Massacre would be good. So Massacre as well, it goes in the above average tier. Again, it just depends on what melee weapon you're using, whether it has blunt attacks or like heavy attacks. And next up is Berserker Rage, and I don't really use this one very much. So I mean, I'm going to give it about above average. Basically, whenever Z time activates or refreshes, you heal 50% like all health and you immobilize Zeds. But the problem is with Berserker Rage, it's only useful in Z time, it doesn't make you go faster. So I mean, you do sort of have to rely on Z time for it to be effective. And speaking of Spartan, it's going to be a very good tier. With Spartan, it's really good for getting out of any bad situation. Like I mentioned before with Parry, you can also take it with Spartan, and it works quite well. With Berserker Rage, you can't really get out of a bad situation, as you are still really slow in Z time. Whereas with Spartan, you can just run through hordes of enemies. Like, it's so easy. I'm moving on to Tactical Reload. This is Commando's level 5 skill. I would say it's an average tier. It doesn't really do very much apart from allowing you to reload faster, which is quite helpful, but again, it's just average. High capacity magazines, I would give this about an above average tier. This basically increases the magazine capacity of assault rifles and even LMGs, as some of Commando's magazines are quite small, which makes it a really good skill to use. And next up is Fallback. Yeah, again, I'd give it above average tier. It's really good for switching weapons really quickly to deal with Zeds. I don't find myself using the 9mm and the knife very much, but if you're a person who uses it a lot, then this will definitely be the skill for you. Impact rounds, I would give about an average tier. I don't like this perk skill, it's so annoying because when you shoot Zeds you just stumble everywhere, it makes it harder for you to aim at them. It's harder to headshot Zeds as well with this skill because they just stumble all over the place, it's so annoying. I don't find myself using it that often. Tenacious, I would give about an average tier. It doesn't really give you that much benefits really. It gives you 25 extra points of health and 25 extra armor, which you can easily burn through if you get cornered. So it does give you a few extra hits, but it's just not that useful. Next up is Prepared. I would give this an above average. It's definitely better than Tenacious. It basically gives you extra ammo. You don't burn through it so quickly. Next up is Hollow Point rounds. I would actually give this a very good tier. For me, Commando is a bit weak against flesh pounds, I've noticed. But with Hollow Point rounds, I can just easily rip through them quite easily. It's so much better at dealing with Zeds as well, because you basically get 30% extra perk damage. Level 20 skill, Eat Lead. Again, it just gives you a bigger magazine capacity. It basically does the same thing as high capacity mags, but it gives you 100% magazine capacity, whereas your level 5 skill high capacity mags only gives you 50%. And you can actually stack these two together as well, which makes it really good for Commando. You get loads more ammo. And next up is Tactician. I would actually give this a very good tier. Commando's main purpose is to extend Z time, which makes Tactician really good. You can basically reload and switch weapons twice as fast. I much prefer Tactician over Machine Gunner because with Machine Gunner you burn through ammo a lot quickly because you do shoot quicker in Z time. Because although you do shoot slower with Tactician, you can extend Z time a lot more. Machine Gunner, I'm going to put this one in about above average. Again, it's not a bad perk skill, but like I mentioned before, I prefer Tactician because it's much easier to extend Z time, you burn through less ammo, but you do 3% more damage, so I suppose that's something. And next up is Bombardier. I mean, I would give this about an average tier. For me, Demo's weapons are quite strong already, so I don't really find myself using this. You got things like the Kaboom Stick, the RPG that do lots of damage anyway, so it's like I don't really see a point in Bombardier. Next up is Shock Trooper, which just reloads your perk weapons a lot faster, and it also increases the knockdown power as well with Demo's weapons. I'll give it about an average tier. It's not a bad perk. It's basically just tactical reload, but with a bit more knockdown power. Next up is High Impact rounds. I would give this about an above average tier. You basically increase your direct hit damage with explosive weapons, which is really good for demo as you can easily take big Zeds out quickly. And this is buffed by about 25% as well, which makes it really effective. Extra rounds, I would give this about an average tier. It does give you extra ammo. It only gives you 10 extra rounds, which you can easily burn through as the demo. And it doesn't apply to C4 either. And next up is Sonic rounds. This is an above average one for me. With Sonic resistant rounds, you basically can kill sirens even if they scream. Because basically with sirens, when they scream, they stop all explosives, they won't go off. Whereas with the level 15 skill, Sonic resistant rounds, you can still kill the siren and it will still explode whether they scream or not. Which is really good for killing sirens who are just really annoying. Fragmentation rounds, same tier as the other one. It basically increases your explosive area by 50%. Basically deals more damage to more Zeds around that area, which is good for clearing crowds. Armor piercing rounds, it basically does the same thing, so it's about the same tier for me. It basically increases the damage of direct hits to critical areas. It basically increases it by 50%, which is pretty cool. Definitely is quite helpful. Not so much on multiplayer with 6 players, but it is quite helpful on solo. Next up is Concussive rounds. I don't really like stumble perks, and just like Commando, I'm going to put it in the same tier. Although for me, it is a lot better than Commando's stumble perk because it is increased 50% and it does knock down Zeds quite well, so I suppose that is a good thing. And next up we have Destroyer of Worlds. This is definitely Demo's best perk skill. Basically, during Z time, when you fire an explosive, it'll deal like massive radiation damage damage, which will kill all of the Zeds in the nearby area. It poisons them as well, which is good for dealing with crowds. Explosives will detonate at any range, regardless if it's an RPG or not, which means if you do fire at the ground it doesn't go off, it will still go off in Z time. Whereas with Mad Bomber, I don't find myself using this one very much because Destroyer of Worlds is just a lot better, so it's going to be an average tier for me. Basically with Mad Bomber you just shoot and reload in near real time, and the area of effect is also increased by 25% as well. Explosive rounds will explode at any range. Mad Bomber, it's just average really. Moving on to Medic's perks, and first off we have Symbiotic Health. This is actually a really good one. Basically, when you heal teammates, it actually gives you like 6% of your total health, which is really good for healing in multiplayer. Not to mention, you also get 25% extra health as well, so it's really good for multiplayer. Next up, we got Resilience. I'm going to put this in about above average. It basically increases your damage resistance, 1% per health lost. And it goes up to 30%, which is quite good. Next up is Adrenaline Shot. This is about an above average. Basically, all your healing increases player movement speed like 10% for 5 seconds. And it also stacks up to 30% as well. It doesn't really work with multiplayer, which is why I prefer Symbiotic Health, because it's more supported for multiplayer. Next up is Combatant Doctor. This is about an average really. It just increases your magazine capacity and movement speed. With your magazine capacity you get a 50% bonus, with movement speed you get a 10% bonus. Mainly used for solo medic, but if you're playing multiplayer medic I would recommend the other level 10 skill. Focus Injection, I would actually give this about a very good tier. This basically increases player damage output when you heal up to 5%, and it can also stack up to a 20% bonus, which makes it really good in solo and multiplayer. Next up is Acidic Rounds. Now this might be a bit controversial what I'm going to say, but I'm going to put it in below average. I don't find myself using this very often. With Medic I always kill Zeds using the bullets, not the darts. I use the darts for healing players, so I find this one really useless really. Like, why would you kill Zeds with darts when you can just use bullets? Next up is Coagulant Booster. I would give this an above average tier, only because it lasts for like 5 seconds, but it does increase your resistance 10%, which can also stack up to a 30% bonus. But again, it only lasts for 5 seconds, which is a really short amount of time. Battle Surgeon, this is the best perk skill you can use for solo medic. This basically increases your weapon damage 20%. Medic isn't so much of a heavy hitting perk, which is why this one is really good for solo, because that way you can do more damage. Next up is Airborne Agent. I would give this about an above average. You release a healing gas that heals teammates close by, which is really good, but I prefer Sedative in my opinion. With Sedative, your perk weapon damage is increased 30% and generate a toxic explosion when you kill a Zed. However, with Sedative, it is a bit annoying. It does rely on killing them, whereas with Airborne Agent it's automatic. Whereas with Sedative you have to kill a Zed for it to work. Next up is Firebug, and we're starting off with Bring the Heat. I would give this an above average tier. Firebug is quite a weak perk with medium to large Zeds. It's more of a trash clearing perk, so Bring the Heat is really good at dealing with larger Zeds. Your other level 5 skill, High Capacity Fuel Tank, I would say again it's the same tier. You basically increase magazine capacity and fuel tank capacity for all weapons 100%, which means you're going to burn through ammo less and you also got a lot more to work with. Next up is Barbecue. I would give this about an average tier. Basically your burn effect lasts 150% longer, which also increases in damage over time, but for me it works a bit too slowly. It takes a bit too long to kill, which is why I prefer Ground Fire. And speaking of Ground Fire, we're putting it again in the higher tier. With Ground Fire, your Ground Fire attack deals 3 times damage, also reduces Zed movement. I much prefer Ground Fire. For me it just kills Zeds much quicker, whereas with Barbecue you sort of have to stand there and wait for it to do anything. Next up is Napalm. I'm going to give this about an average tier. Basically Zeds that want fire will inflict fire damage on other Zeds when they make contact with them, and also again the burn effect lasts 150% longer, which you can stack with Barbecue as well. Zed Shrapnel, this is a really good Firebug skill. Basically Zeds have a 30% chance to explode, which inflicts damage on other Zeds, which can damage them or stun them. It's really good for crowd control as well, you can easily rip through hordes of enemies, although it is a bit hit and miss because sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it does because it has a 30% chance. Next up is Heatwave. I would give this about an average tier. Basically, when Zeds get struck at point blank range with fire, they'll stumble back, which I mean is good for crowd control, not really that effective in my eyes, but it is still quite effective at controlling hordes of enemies. Next up is Firestorm. Again, this is an average tier. It basically just increases the range of your Culk and Burn, flamethrower, microwave gun. It also increases the ground fire duration 20%. Basically all it does is increases the range of the flamethrower, doesn't increase damage or like efficiency. Next up is Pyromaniac. I'll give this about above average. Basically during Z time you attack with perk weapons in close to real time, you never run out of ammo. Whereas with Inferno, the only thing you get is increased fire damage over time, which is a bit slow in my eyes. Just like Barbecue, it does work quite slowly, so I would give this like a little bit lower. Next up is Steady. I would give this about an above average. You basically ignore movement speed penalty, increase perk weapon damage 7.5% when using Iron Sight, drastically reduce weapon bob as well, so it does have quite a lot of good perk skills with it. However, for me, I've always used Quick Draw with it, so it's not better than Steady, but I'd still give it about the same tier. With Quick Draw, you reduce recoil penalty for shooting from the hip, increase movement speed 5%. You also switch weapons 50% faster, which is really good for Gunslinger. Next up is Rack 'em Up. To no one's surprise, this is going to be an exceptional tier. I mean, we all know why, because you basically get 10% extra damage, up to a maximum of 50 if you get times 5. Just rips through absolutely anything, Rack 'em Up. Doesn't matter how big of a Zed it is or how big of a boss, you will just easily kill anything. It's really good. Bonebreaker, it's not as good as Rack 'em Up for a level 10 skill, but it is still pretty good. You get 20% extra perk damage, and you also inflict 30% more damage to arms and legs, but I would much prefer Rack 'em Up because again you get 50% more damage, which is 30% more than Bonebreaker, so it's like, why not? Line them up, I would probably give about an average tier. All you do really is shoot through Zeds and it suffers no damage reduction. It basically increases the penetration of perk weapons, so I mean it is good, but it's just not something I find myself using. Speed Loader, I would say it's slightly better for Gunslinger, but all it does really is reload your perk weapons faster, but considering Gunslinger needs faster reloading speeds for damage, I would give it above average. Skullcracker, I would actually give this a pretty good tier. Basically, it slows down Zeds 30% when you headshot them, which pairing this with Rack 'em Up, you can easily tear through any Zeds because it basically stumbles them, which gives you the opportunity to rack up like a lot of Rack 'em Ups. Knock 'em down, about an average tier. All it does is slow Zeds down when you shoot them in the leg. Shooting Zeds in the chest as well will massively increase the stumble power, so it's basically just like a stumble perk, really. Whirlwind of Lead, I would give about above average tier. Basically, it allows you to shoot without running out of ammo, but you do shoot a lot slower in Z time. Whereas with Fanfire, you do shoot faster and you do reload in real time, but you do run out of ammo in Z time, whereas Whirlwind of Lead does allow you to shoot infinitely. Moving on to Sharpshooter skills. This one is about an above average for me. It basically allows you to get extra damage when stationary and using a perk weapon, but for me I prefer stability. Marksman allows you to shoot 25% faster, it also increases your movement speed 10%, so I'd give it about an above average tier. It is pretty good for Sharpshooter, allows you to take down Zeds much quicker. And next up is Stability. This is a really good Sharpshooter skill. I much prefer this over Sniper, because unlike Sniper you get a 30% increased damage, you also move 50% faster when you crouch, whereas with Sniper you have to stand still for it to be effective, whereas with Stability you can crouch and move, which is really good. Sniper and Stability can also be grouped together, you can use both of them at the same time, although I prefer Marksman. Ballistic Shock, again I don't like stumble perks, so I'm going to give this an average tier. Again, it's just so annoying because Zeds just stumble everywhere, it makes it harder to aim at them. Rack 'em up, again, just like the Gunslinger version, it is a really good perk skill. Although with Sharpshooter, I tend to use it more on bosses than actual normal games. Tactical reload, it's just an average tier really, it just increases your reload speed, nothing else to it really. Deadeye will reduce your recoil by 10%. It also increases headshot damage by 10% when you use iron sights with perk weapons. I mean, it is a good perk skill. I always tend to use Always Prepared though, because I just have more ammo, but that's just my opinion. And speaking of that, I'm going to put Always Prepared in the exact same tier. With Always Prepared, it doesn't really give you any other abilities apart from having extra ammo and 1 extra grenade. So both level 20 skills are pretty good, you can't really go wrong with it, to be honest. Next up is Assassin. This is a really good sharpshooter skill. Basically, in Z time, you can increase your headshot damage by 35%. And if you also have Rack 'em Up with this as well, it's really effective at taking down larger Zeds. Whereas with Ranger, it's more stunning Zeds in Z time. So, I mean, it isn't bad. It does save you some time. I'll put it about above average, but it's just not that great for me. So moving on to support, we have high capacity magazines. For me, it's going to be an above average. You basically get 75% extra magazine capacity, which is really good for support. Whereas with the other level 5 skill, tactical reload, again it just allows you to reload faster. Nothing really much to it, it's about average really. Fortitude again is in the same boat as tactical reloads. You do get more health. On higher difficulties you're just going to lose that anyway, so it's like what's the point? Although you do get 10% extra damage resistance, so I mean that is something. But if you could regenerate health like the Berserker skill, this would actually be quite good, but Fortitude is just not that good for me. Salvo, this might be a bit controversial, but I'm actually going to put it in the very good tier. It basically increases your weapon damage 30%, which makes shotguns really effective with larger Zeds. With Fortitude you just get health, which is temporary, whereas with Salvo you get permanent 30% damage. Armor piercing shot, this is going to be an above average. You basically increase your penetration and a 10% damage increase with perk weapons, which is really good with shotguns like the AA-12 for just clearing crowds. Tight choke is a really good one as well. This is basically the same tier. The shotgun spread is a lot smaller, which means pellets can travel further, because with regular shotguns they won't have a massive spread to them, whereas tight choke allows it to travel further, which makes it really good. Resupply pack is another good one. This basically gives you more ammo. So basically your teammates can get 30% of their ammo and 20% armor restored by interacting with you, and you can also carry up to 20% more ammo yourself, which makes it really good for everybody. Concussive rounds is about an average tier. Again, it's just for stumbling Zeds. I don't find myself liking stumbling Zeds that much, so it's just not that great. Penetrator, this is a really good perk skill for support. I'll give this a very good tier. Basically, this allows you to suffer no damage reduction. You basically go through all of the Zeds regardless of how big they are. You can also reload in real time as well, which makes it really good for supporting the team in Z time. Barrage, I would give this about an average tier. It only really allows your weapons to shoot in real time, whereas with Penetrator it has a lot more perk skills, a lot more usefulness. Next up is Survivalist. Your level 5 skill tactical reload allows you to reload Commando, Gunslinger and SWAT weapons, which again is just average really. It doesn't add anything else other than faster reload speed. Again, your other level 5 skill, heavy weapons training, it only allows you to reload other perks guns like demo, sharpshooter, support. Although you can't really mix and match, it has to be specific weapons for it to work, which is a bit annoying. Next up is medic training. This is a pretty good perk skill for the survivalist. Basically, just like medic, you can heal really fast. You also got a faster recharge time for your medic syringe. This is a really good one for survivalist. It allows you to stay alive longer without a medic. So if you're playing survivalist solo, this would be a really good one. Melee expert is really good as well. This basically increases your melee attack speed by 20%. You inflict 75% more damage, which is a lot. And you also move 25% faster as well using any melee weapon. Ammo vest allows you to carry 15% more ammo. And not to mention, you can also select a healing grenade, which is really good for survivalists for quickly healing. If you're missing a medic on your team, this will definitely be like a really good one. Weapon harness, I would give this an average tier. It basically just gives you 5 extra weight, and you can also select a Molotov as your grenade, which is pretty cool, good for crowd control. Spontaneous Zplosion, this is definitely one of the best survivalist perks. I would give this a very good tier. Just like Firebug's version, Zeds have a 30% chance to explode. I think it's actually higher on Survivalist than Firebug for some reason, but basically Zeds have a chance to explode, stunning and damaging nearby Zeds. Although again it is a bit hit and miss because you don't know when it will go off. Make things go boom, I would give this about an average tier. It only really increases your explosive resistance and area of the explosion by 50%. Doesn't really increase damage or anything, so I mean if this was on demo it would be a lot better, but for Survivalists I don't see myself using it that often. Level 25 skill Madman, I would have to give this about an average tier. You shoot 3 times faster in Z time, however you do reload really slowly, which means you can easily burn through ammo, and the reload speed can make this one quite annoying. Level 25 skill Lockdown, this basically just stumbles Zeds in Z time, just like the Sharpshooter skill. So yeah, it is just average really, I don't like stumbles that much. And finally, last but not least, we have the SWAT perks, and starting off with Heavy Armor Training, I would actually give this a very good tier. With Heavy Armor Training you only take damage from sonic attacks and clots can't grab you either. You also begin the game with 50% more armor, so as long as you have armor, Zeds can't really hurt you, but you do have to be careful because that armor could easily go down very quickly. Tactical Movement is another good one for SWAT, this is about above average. SWAT is kind of slow, so it is really useful to have tactical movement. You do move faster, there's no movement penalty for using iron sights or crouching movement with perk weapons. So just like with stability with Sharpshooter, it works same as that one. Close Combat Training, I'm going to give this about an above average tier. It basically works the same as Commando's fallback skill, you just get extra damage for your knife, your 9mm. You can switch weapons quicker, so it is really good for quickly healing and also quickly switching weapons when you get stuck. Tactical Reload, this is an average tier really, it just increases your reload speed, nothing else. Suppression Rounds, again it just stumbles Zeds. I don't really like stumble perks, I just find it annoying because you can't aim properly when they all stumble all over the place. Ammo Vest is a really good one, however for level 15 I would definitely give this about an above average. It does what it says on the tin and gives you more ammo, 30% more for each perk. Assault Armor is really good, I'll give it above average, but it's not as good as level 5 skill Heavy Armor Training, and that's because with Assault Armor it doesn't give you resistance to Z damage, which means you do get an extra 50% extra armor, but you don't get the same skills as Heavy Armor Training, but you can stack them together and you'll get 150 armor total. Cripple is another good one as well, it's about above average. It does the same thing as the Stumble perks, except it doesn't make them move around as much. If you hit a Z with a perk weapon, it will slow them down rather than just stumbling them all over the place. The head and weak spot shots apply twice as fast, which means they're a lot more vulnerable when you use Cripple. Battering Ram, this is another good one for SWAT. This basically allows you to run really quickly in Z time, knocking down any Z that gets in your way. Although the only issue is if there's no Zeds nearby you, it is a bit useless, but considering if you get stuck in a corner, it will be really useful for getting out of a bad situation. And finally, last but not least, we have Rapid Assault. This is going to be about an above average. It basically does everything the other perks do. You get infinite amount of ammo in Z time, you shoot in real time. So I mean, it works the same as most of the perk skills when in Z time. But anyway, this was my Killing Floor 2 perk skills tier list. This was a very long video to make. This actually took me about an hour. I'm actually quite exhausted after it. Quite a lot of talking, but yeah, if you did enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, join Discord if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video.